Today, we'll talk to Daniel Nath. He's one of our students from the very first cohort. He's now currently working at Google in their Dublin office in the growth marketing team. He's come back to campus, and we wanted to ask him a few questions around how he built up his CV, how he built up himself, to make this Google role possible. Because as it stands today, it's hard essentially to score a role in an international office of Google from India. So to understand his entire journey, we'll talk to him today in quite a little bit of depth. So stay tuned, guys. Looking forward to it. But how's it going, yeah? What's been up? It's been now almost, 8 months since you graduated from Masters Union.
Yeah.
What's been up?
Life's been exciting, I would say, very busy. But I think time just flew. I mean, I can't even imagine how, the last 16 months and then, of course, now 8 months, it doesn't feel like that. I mean, I came to campus today, felt everything was brand new. I'm like, okay, that's the classroom. You have to go sit in that desk of mine and stuff like that. But, I've got so many memories here. It feels so good, to be here. But yeah, I mean,
So what are you most excited about, in life in general? Like, what is something that you're looking forward to? What is something that, you can't wait for?
I think what I'm super excited about, I think, I don't want to sound cliched, but I've really wanted to, since the last 8 years, I think that's become my mission, that I really want to create something of value for people.
So when did this start? Like, when did this this bug sort of bite you?
So almost 8 years ago, I and my college roommate. And by the way, there's a story that has not gone out.
Okay.
It's nowhere. So it's something that something that I don't talk about openly. But it all started actually with when a friend of mine and I, who were both roommates, we said, what, in college, let's not do what everybody's doing. Something that's very conventional. Let's try doing something interesting. So have you heard of Cyanide and Happiness?
Of course.
Those of course.
Comic strips.
Yeah, exactly. So we said, what, let's start, animation looks like such an interesting thing to do. Let's talk about college through animation.
Okay.
And then we created a page. It all happened overnight, midnight conversations that happened. One thing led to the other. And before we know it, we actually created a Facebook page with videos. I don't want to name it, but it was funny, all about college stories that you can't, probably talk with photos. So we did an animation of sorts. And that page actually got about 70,000 subscribers, YouTube subscribers. It had about 5 lakh followers. Till today, it exists. Though we discontinued that, within a couple of months. I think that was the beginning of where I realized that there's something unique and something of value that can be created. Of something, as simple as just talking about a story through animation. And from there started the whole journey of my, becoming a student entrepreneur, starting my first venture called Zigway, which was a standardized homestays.
So let's get to that step by step. So you were in college and you worked on this YouTube/Facebook page.
Yeah.
It obviously went viral in many ways. 500,000 followers, 5 lakh followers almost. And then why did you shut it? Why did you not continue with it?
Very, very good question. So it wasn't really a business of sorts which we had, we had thought of actually. It was just an entertainment thing that we did on the sidelines, and it wasn't really sustainable, is what we figured after a point in time. So that's when a lot of these journeys teach you about entrepreneurship and startups.
So we understand why you stopped working on your Facebook page. Then what did you do? I mean, now that the bug had bitten you, what did you do next?
So actually realized that, hey, this is my calling kind of sorts. I said, I just was so obsessed with the idea of starting something, solving a real problem. It could be college, it could be outside. At that time, scope was still college because you're around there. But I said, before I make the next jump of maybe starting a venture, why not experience what actually happens on the ground? Because experience is something which is of a lot of value. So I actually interned at a lot of cool places. I have about 10 internships that I did
during college,
oh, wow. Which was a number that nobody had beaten by then. I interned at these places like the Center of Innovation in IIM Ahmedabad. First-hand saw, entrepreneurs building. I was an intern then, right?
Got it.
And as an intern, the best part is, knowledge is something you can consume with anywhere and any place that you can go to. So that's how it happened. Went to Atlin, Freshworks, all of these places. And this is I'm talking about back in 2013-14.
And so now college finishes.
Yeah.
You graduate. Did you graduate?
Yes.
You graduated. Okay.
Yes.
And then what did you do after then? Did you start your company straight away?
After these internships that I did, I started a company called Human Fox.
Human
Fox.
Fox.
Yeah.
Okay.
So Human Fox actually was born very interestingly from the problems I saw on campus. And what was that? It was essentially where I saw that there were so many talented people across the table, did everything apart from the core subject that they had signed up for, which is engineering or whatever they were doing. Like there was someone who was a tennis, player who was an international tennis player, someone who was a, great designer, but doing it for, doing, engineering or doctor, like for that matter, different, like in this case, engineering, for that matter. So I thought it was just a tick box that they were doing, but imagine the state where all of these, people could actually follow through on what they really,
genuinely passionate about,
passionate about, and actually become good at it. Not just passion, right? Because I felt like passion was a very, passion only takes you to a certain stage. You also have to monetarily be able to make that money to be able to follow through, right? So that's how it all began. So I realized that, me and two of my co-founders, with a team of 10, we started this platform called Moonshot.
So Human Fox
is the company brand name. We had one of our products that we started was Moonshot and something called Capsule. So Capsule essentially was where we would, we said what works in India, and something that we had after talking to a lot of people was that when we say passion or ask people to follow through on what they want to do, they would really love to see influencers talk about it and see somebody get there. That's how inspiration happens, and that's how like people move to that direction, right? Today we've seen that. So we realized that, hey, you know what? If you want to really convince people, we really need influencers to come on the platform to be able to do that and share unconventional stories. So imagine at the age of about 19, 20 is when I'm talking about. Again, reached out to thousands of influencers at that point in time. So that's how the whole story began. So 1.5 years I ran the company. College was ending. That's when the first time I came through this concept of co-founder conflict, right? Where one of my co-founders, like we had a vision disparity, and we realized that, hey, you know what? I want to continue this full time, but I don't see myself putting 10 people's lives at stake, with the kind of very small to I would say very young to make that decision.
You were 21, right? No,
yeah,
it's fine.
But that's happened. That's what happened, and. Good news was, I think, from a parent's perspective, where they wanted me to take up a job, even though they knew what I was doing and they were happy with the achievements I had, but they were not like, they were like, okay, you know what, like every parent, right, like worried about everything. So here's what I did. I said, you know what, I'll give you an offer. I'll get you an offer. You don't trouble me for 6 months. Let me see where this goes. Let me give me, trouble's the wrong word to use, but my, the intention here was that, you know what, just give me my space. You be secure. So there's only one campus. I sat on campus for one company, and it was Freshworks. They took 3 people, and amongst the 3, they took one at a level 1 above, unlike a fresher, and that was me. So I said, you know what, this is a good offer, great, everything is good. Just don't, give me the 6 months. In those 6 months is where I said, you know what, let's give it one final shot. And eventually ended up, saying that, if this is not working out, but at least I gave it my everything.
Got it. So then did you take up that Freshworks job offer eventually?
No, I did not.
Achha, then what happened?
I did not. So Freshworks, gave me an offer, but here's then the idea of how risk taking for me had actually, I had tasted something where I said that, you know what, I really want to create something of value. I really want hands-on experience, right? Freshworks at that point in time had 1,000 employees, even though it was like today they've got a lot more. So I said, I want to be in a smaller setup and I want a bigger challenge. If I'm not doing this, let's talk about, if I'm not doing my venture, then I want an equally challenging, aspect to kind of try my hands on. That's how this company called inFeedo happened. So inFeedo was an SaaS platform, has a bot which talks to employees and helps the CXOs identify who are disengaged and happy to leave. So very interesting concept, but I came to know about them through a Shark Tank that they had won. Just about
the US?
Not the Shark Tank, India
course.
that happened.
Yeah.
Even before in 2016, there was a show called The Vault.
Yes, of course. Yeah.
And by the time I had offers from every other place I could possibly dream of, but it was just not clicking for me, right? And I said, you know what, let's take up this challenge. Why not? So no standard recruitment process. Again, the cold email strategy works. Wrote a cold email to them, to the founder and CEO, Tanmay. Within about 10 minutes, got a response. The next day we met at Starbucks, the same CyberHub Starbucks that you see over here. Sat for almost 6 to 7 hours straight, one-on-one conversation, and said, you know what, it's a done deal. So that's how I came on board as an entrepreneur in residence. And built up marketing functions from scratch, sales functions from scratch, started closing deals end to end, working parallelly on the culture of the team as well. And, before you know it, I mean, it was a 7-day grind, literally, Pratham. I can't even begin to tell you the kind of exertion and I think um, uh, the kind of effort that it took. But it was so exciting every single day, right? That's how time flew. I mean, I was working 7 days a week and not even kidding. Saturday, Sunday. Why? Because I was working Middle East, where Sunday is working. And when we had clients, let's say in one client and maybe a customer in Singapore, you're working the APAC time zone and the EMEA time zone. So on and so forth. It just so happened 3 years passed by from about literally $100,000 in revenue, in annual recurring revenue. We grew to about $2 million, completely bootstrapped. Right, and that's something that's unheard of in India, especially like a SaaS company. This I'm talking about 2016, 17, right? Are completely unheard of. And then COVID happened, where, I mean, of course, in between, opened about 25 markets, international markets. I was handling, my last role officially was heading international sales for EMEA and APAC.
Correct.
So it opened 25 markets, had a team and everything. But COVID happened in 2020, right?
So, inFeedo's going well. You guys are growing from 100K to $2 million in like 2 years, 3 years, all bootstrapped. I mean, that's a great recipe, right? Why did you decide to join Masters Union?
So for me, I think, again, I'm a little unconventional of sorts because once, what had happened was once the entrepreneurial bug hits you, and that's something that I learned, Pratham, you can definitely validate that, it is always in you. I mean, that bug never goes away, no matter what you do, right? No matter what role you take up. So it was always inside of me that I really want to start up again. And you wouldn't believe this, but my conversation with the founder was so transparent when I joined in. And I said, you know what, just know that if I'm going to leave you guys, unless there's something drastically wrong in revenue or whatever, and we're not able to sustain this, but unless there's another reason that's so substantial enough for me to, to motivate me, it's only the only reason I'll exit or probably leave is going to be if I want to start up again.
Got it.
Right. And this was in 2000, right after COVID, 2020 is when you're talking about the first batch, right? So I decided to leave I wanted to start up, as I told you already. The entrepreneurial bug was already inside. I wanted to exit, but at some point in time, like with the 3 years that I had completed over there, but this whole COVID dilemma came in, right? So I extended my stay, but I was very clear I'm going to leave to start up, right? And at that point in time, with the kind of experience I've had with Founders Office, did enterprise sales, multiple functions, I felt like I was I actually was also, I was a little burnt out with all the aggressive, work that I had done over the years. And I said, you know what, I really want to broaden my, horizon as well, get into understand what's HR, understand what's finance, understand a little bit more technically as well. And COVID was a time when I felt like it was a great pause to kind of reset the button.
So before we move on to Masters Union, I want to talk to you about sales. You did 3 years of enterprise sales, right? And I've noticed this in undergrad colleges, even in MBA colleges, that people think that sales is low. That sales is something that if I have to do, that means it's a tier 3 placement or a tier 4 placement, right? Nobody sits for those kind of companies that offer sales roles. Everyone wants to do consulting and everyone wants to do product management and chief of staff and all of that. What do you say to those people?
Yeah, it's fair. I'll tell you why. Fair from a thought perspective. The reasons because sales as a function is so misunderstood because of the kind, certain experiences that we've all had in the past where somebody's trying to, people think it's about hard selling, it's about not letting go, it's about, those kind of thought process that comes in because people have actually, when they say sales, they've only seen B2C side of things, where you're talking about, and also comes from like historical products of sorts that are sold, right? Sales as a career is extremely rewarding. And as from a B2B perspective, I'll give you a little bit more insight about B2B first, because that's what I was doing. B2B sales is got so much of return from a financial perspective, and the kind of experience you have is something that is very underrated. Here, when you talk about consulting, right, people talk about client experience. Isn't that correct, right? I want client experience, front office.
Right.
I want to do front office. I don't want to do back office.
Client face time.
Exactly. Yeah. Imagine as an enterprise sales guy, as a B2B enterprise sales guy, I was dealing with CHROs and CEOs of all these Fortune 500 companies. And there you are yourself accountable for it. It's not like, you've got a team of 20 people. So you are literally the face of the company, right? So my point is the network I've made, the exposure that I've got to, the thoughts, the kind of skill set that I've gained. again, I would like to reiterate that sales is one skill that the generations of like the biggest of business gurus in the world have said that it's the most important. There's one skill you want to learn in your life. It's sales. It's about the wrong misconception. It's all about business. It's not. We're talking about ourselves. We talk about interviews. We talk about just negotiating with even your family for that matter, or decisions when you go out to buy a shop, like buy something in a shop, right? So that's the whole thought process behind it. So it's not conceived in the right way because people have not had exposure that something like this exists, right? So that's what my thought would be, that it's very rewarding. Obviously, financially also, salespeople make the most money, with the performance that you do, uncapped variables, and a lot of that stuff. But the exposure that you get because you're the face is a lot more. From a B2C perspective as well, it's great. It's just that the whole nuances of how you deal with a B2C, where you're dealing with everyday consumers like you and me, vis-a-vis someone who's a CXO.
I mean, whoever's watching this, seriously, I mean, in India specifically, I feel that sales is very underrated.
It is
as a career path.
Absolutely
right?
correct.
When, in terms of exposure, as you mentioned, it provides you one of the best opportunities. But also, as you said, it's an uncapped compensation that you can possibly get. Everywhere else, it's going to be, this is your fixed and this is your variable up to X lakhs, right? Or up to X crores.
Right.
But in sales, there is no up to, right? The more you sell.
It is completely performance driven. And the good news, I'll tell you, Pratham, I think let's look a little bit more beyond. When you talk about sales, it's not just about the money you make. Imagine I had maybe 25, 30 CHROs and CEOs whose contacts I already had.
Yeah.
I had offers from them before coming to MU.
Yeah.
To Masters Union, right?
I can imagine.
Anybody who wants to today also when we're talking about roles, even in my batch during that time. But my point is, anyone who wants any reference, I make one phone call, it's done. Now, the kind of direct networking that you can do, right, is so underrated, right?
Absolutely.
Flying down to people, meet people, the kind of relationships that you can build is everlasting.
And I think at the end of the day, even a consulting at a BCG or a PwC, even that requires sales.
Exactly.
Or in fact, I mean, that is
very
sales,
good point,
right?
you said. It is about sales, right? You're
sales.
convincing, on someone on a client project, like a client that you're, the presentation that you
First
made.
you have to pitch. I mean, 50% of the time you're pitching.
It's that only most of the time, right? So that's absolutely true.
My job is sales. What is this that we are doing essentially, right? At the end of the day.
Yeah, very true. It's everywhere. I think, and sales as a skill, irrespective of placements, let's go one step beyond, is going to help you in everything that you do. So just psychology, sales, negotiation, right? How do you negotiate? It's such an important skill to have, which gives you unfair advantage. Trust me, Pratham, that it might be underrated. People might not go for it, but the people who go for it and the people who don't, there's a stark difference in what they end up achieving in their careers.
I'm sure.
I personally feel sales is something, and I'm not biased because I've done other functions. I've experienced other roles as well. But I feel everybody should do sales at least one time in their careers to be able to understand the kind of rejections you go through, the kind of challenges you go through. And
builds your character at the end of the day.
Yeah. And sales, according to me, is all about helping people.
Consulting.
Yeah.
Essentially.
Literally.
Okay, so let's now come to Masters Union.
Yeah.
What was that like for you?
Oh my God. I think it was a roller coaster in itself, I would say. I mean, I just had so much of fun. I think more than I had possibly imagined, as much as I learned so much from the people around. I think the classroom setup that, the kind of classroom setup we had, where most importantly, the diverse cohort that we had, the CXOs coming and teaching in the classroom. I think there's a list of so many things at Masters Union that kind of connected the dots to also eventually helping me shape my thought process and eventually help me in the decisions that I took. So personally, my favorite, I love the few courses. And as the good news was over here is, unlike undergrad, where I couldn't choose my subjects, here I could choose my subjects, right? So I was very, clear that these are the interesting topics that I want to learn from. And imagine these are the kind of CXOs and interesting people I want to learn it from. So I think those were power packed.
What was your favorite course?
Two favorite courses.
All right.
One was Captain Raghuraman on leadership, right? And the second was Mihir Mankar on arts of communication.
What did you like about each of these courses?
So Raghuraman, from a leadership perspective, it's so leadership, by the way, has got so diverse perspectives that people have. And I would say it's underrated and overrated both, according to me, right? So these misconceptions on how important leadership is and what it actually means in the field, where he gave real life examples about his time from the defense. And they don't think about any other variable that's there. They only think about their own leader, immediate leader, who's there, the one who's commanding or leading them from the front, right? And the biggest leadership lesson that he taught, and something that I realized I was doing that and I want to do that as well, was walking the talk. The biggest I would say leadership lesson that we learned. I personally took away a lot from that example, right? Walking the talk. I think there's no better way to show leadership, and leadership is going to be required everywhere, whether you're going to be working, whether you're going to start up, anything that you do in life, it revolves around having leadership traits.
Okay.
So that's one. Professor Mihir Mankar broke a lot of myths, I would say. When you talk about communication today, arts of communication is what he taught us in class. People feel it's a very easy subject, or it's about communication, theek hai, I can speak well, that's completely fine and all that. But that's where we realized how difficult communicating is at different levels of where we are and what we do in life. So talking about diplomats, we're given real case studies on, one of us, two people of us were randomly, picked up from the classroom. There's a scene that he's like, okay, lights, camera, action. You're Hillary Clinton. This is the response. This is the question asked by the reporter. How do you handle that? How do you answer that? Right. So thinking on the feet, effective communication. In the end of the whole course that we had, we were all supposed to give a speech of a few minutes. And so much of work went into that. People feel, hey, giving a speech is so easy. But we knew how important each pronunciation, each word, each placement was for that. So these are the two things, two courses that I really loved.
And I believe you also started up while you were in Masters Union.
Yeah.
So tell us more about that.
So I had exited inFeedo, and I'm continuing the story from there, right? I mean, my whole reason for leaving and exiting was the fact that I could start up. So I was very clear in my head from day one that I want to start up. And one of the problems that I think I was really passionate about was in the space of cybersecurity, where I felt like cybersecurity was underrated, but in fact was the biggest problem. And so
was it hard to balance all the startup work with your studies and grades, etc.?
People definitely, it is difficult. It's not easy, but it's definitely doable. That's the thing, right? And people, everything is possible, and
enough
that's
hours,
how it works.
Enough hours in the day.
It's about you figuring it out, right? So that's what I think one of my biggest learnings, or a skill, I would say skill set, that I took away from Masters Union was the fact that I was juggling between everything, right? And again, no matter what the result, that effort pays on a lot in the end. And of course, we can talk about that, but how, you actually being able to manage everything shows, and helps a lot in the kind of skill set you would want to, eventually have if you're an employer, or if you're, let's say, you want to start up as well. Those are the traits that you...
So as you were working on your startup during Masters Union, how far, were you able to bring it in terms of, customers, product, sales, etc.?
Yeah. So interestingly, what we ended up doing. So by the way, the cybersecurity space is the deep tech space, right? Where there's actually years of R&D that's required to build any product for that matter, unlike SaaS that had previously operated. So it was the first time that I was in the deep tech space as well. So we realized that it cannot be like a proper, just a very temporary mock-up that we can create, or maybe the platform that we can full-fledged create. So what we ended up doing was doing experiments, micro experiments there, where we actually built certain parts of the product, somehow pieced it together and tested it actually with clients. So government of India was actually a client. I can't name them, but we tested it out over there. We developed took it to a MVP stage with all the resources that we could pull through. We're bootstrapping completely, but we got an incubation offer from IIT Bombay's incubation. We actually about $250,000 is what we got worth of commits from very good people. But what I realized was the fact that from a revenue cycle, and again, being the business mindset that comes in, it'll take me a lot of time before revenue starts kicking in. And apart from that, there were also certain personal things that were going on in my life, which is why, again, the question about how you take a decision, now vis-a-vis then, is when I decided that I would probably become an advisor in the company. Company is great, the space is great, the founder is great, founders are great. I think it was a testament with whatever we had done and achieved. But that's when I decided to become an advisor, and that's how I exited just about a few months ago. Not exited as I'm going to be an advisor, but the company is going great. It's just going to be a time-taking process.
Yeah.
As I said, unlike SaaS, the revenue cycle for deep tech is very large, and specifically from an investment perspective as well. Pratham, when I was doing fundraising as well, not a lot of investors understand, deep tech, specifically cybersecurity in that.
Correct.
So even from that perspective, it was important, and they expected us to make good amount of revenue before they even fund.
So what, as you were doing your startup during your college, your MBA experience, what were some of the learnings you had that perhaps others who are not doing a startup simultaneously did not?
So I think there's a lot of difference. I'll be very honest with you. There's a stark difference in the kind of skill set that you get, which is tangible and intangible both. In this case, it's very important when you're a founder, right? You identify opportunities and build something from scratch. Now, that's not something that everybody, like with somebody who's got resources and constraints, like as I was telling you before, right? When you operate with constraints, when you operate with, let's say, an horizon of building something of value from zero, you end up learning how to sell, you end up learning how to market, you're learning how to code, literally, making up mockups and all of that. So you get such a diverse set of skill set, which is very good for connecting the dots. And connecting the dots is all, it's all about that at the end of the day, whether you want to start up, whether you want a job, every single place, unlike, let's say, people who are just with the mindset of saying that, hey, you know what, this is what's given to me, this is the path that I've thought about, and this is what I'm going to do, and very fixated with that. So having that flexibility, that agility, being street smart to be able to take some certain decisions, right? Taking risk as an appetite, in the process learning how to sell, in the process learning how to do an elevator pitch, in the process learning how to talk to partners
and
at
apply
venture
whatever
firms.
you've learned in class
Exactly.
actually to a real world scenario.
Exactly.
You don't have to wait 2 years till you find a job and then you start applying. You can apply in the evening.
Exactly.
Whatever you learn in the morning.
Exactly. So I think that's exactly what was happening here as well, right? Like we had, apart from, my venture as well, as part of the innovation lab, we had 2 other ventures that were getting incubated. Both of them now have successfully doing
Fundraiser.
They've already fundraised and stuff. But this is literally what was happening, right? We had their prototype being tested in the classroom of 50, 60 people, everybody engaged, everybody trying out what
So
they were
did the
doing.
other students feel FOMO? Like, we're not doing this?
It's an immediate validation, Pratham. Imagine, like, as entrepreneurs, you want initial, set of partners, or you call them design partners, right?
Correct.
Imagine you're getting them like a set of so many smart people in the classroom wanting to help you grow. Right? I think that is exactly what
That's
happened.
60 first customers, that's 60 first employees, that's 60 first.
Exactly. You're like, okay, this is a marketing campaign that we learned in the marketing class. Let's come up with a campaign for ourselves, do it next week itself. So it's immediate learn to execution, right? And that's the cycle you want to be reducing as much as possible, even in the general world when you're applying, or generally when you're doing that.
Now let's again shift gears, right? So after your master's union experience, after your, what was the name of the company? Cypherix. After your Cypherix experience, I know you decided not to continue with it. You decided to become an advisor there. How did you decide to then sort of start looking for jobs? I mean, you have had such a entrepreneurial journey so far. Why the shift now? How did Google happen?
That's true. So I actually didn't plan to, join Google. Wasn't in my shortlist as well. But the opportunity was an inbound, Pratham. So I actually, the way I operate and the way I was, I was operating and the way I was taking decisions was where I actually had to just pick the company I wanted to reach out to, and then maybe have a conversation like it, take ahead the offer. And by that time, I had also over the last 7-8 years, Pratham, I've built a network which has been very consciously built, where I wanted to, explore opportunities and obviously tell recruiters. Like even before I came to MU, I had offers. I had Gartner and LinkedIn reach out to me. Big companies, they were not even in my consideration. Startups anyway were anywhere there. But Google came as an inbound for me because of my network, and obviously people knew now that I was looking out. Until this time, they were holding themselves back to even happen. But that's how the recruiter reached out. And then the kind of opportunity that came out with them, like a very interesting kind of role that I'm getting. I think that was something that
So what's the role?
So right now I'm going to be joining I've just joined the growth team. And growth team, essentially what they do is the highest growing startups in the UK and Ireland region. So I've been allocated the territory of UK and Ireland, English-speaking country. So over there, the highest growing startups, helping them grow 10x. So literally with a Google suite of products, right from AdWords to YouTube, display, all of that, I will be the point of contact for CMOs and CEOs and help them strategize and grow their business 10x.
Got it.
So that sounded like an interesting opportunity for me to get the variables that I had told you was there.
So essentially, if I want to score a similar role at Google, what I hear you suggesting essentially is that you spend time building your network, you spend time helping other people, you spend time perhaps doing your own startup and building some skill sets, building that respect in your community.
Absolutely right.
And then eventually, these kind of offers will come inbound to you rather than you having to cold call or cold email.
And I'll tell you, Pratham, very, very interesting. The other day, I think this is a couple of months back, you and I were chatting when, I was actively fundraising. And something that you told me, which I resonated with, was you said the best investors find you. You remember that?
Yeah, of course.
So, and that's something that I also completely resonate with, because before I started fundraising, Pratham, I had 40 inbounds, right? My only reason of telling you that number is to tell you that it's not the other way around where people are thinking the way it is. It's not about you applying. You do great work. It all compounds and the best opportunities reach you. That's exactly what happened. So you have to really build, actively ensure that you're compounding your network and you give. That's exactly another point that you brought out, which I wanted to really talk about, which is essentially you don't expect anything in return for all the effort that you're putting in. Whether it's building your network, whether it's studying in B school, whether it is helping the other person who you don't maybe know, that 1 or 2 minutes that you can take out and spare, you have no idea how that can
come back and benefit you in
the
ways
most unexpected places. That's the whole point, right? Like the least places.
So how did this recruiter find you?
Oh, I think so. I actually used to hang out a lot in as I was handling the EMEA territory and APAC territory. I was already known in the HR tech space as well, right? Like, as I said, I was dealing with CHROs and HR recruiters and all that.
Oh, so the Google role came because of your sales experience, essentially.
Which was, I kind of now, I mean, I wouldn't say directly that, but kind of, I mean, if I think about it, maybe I think maybe that's the reason as well. Because of the kind of networking that I did. Networking as in helping the community. Small example, back in the COVID days, you wouldn't believe it, but so this was a people crisis that we had with COVID, right? Unlike the financial crisis. So one of the things that I did was I would get do a webinar of sorts, non-salesy, no agenda, nothing, where we would have 10 people or 5 HR recruiters and HR heads and stuff to only be there to talk about their challenges that they're facing and the ideas that they would, that they would have. Now imagine what they would entail, right? Like, imagine like not having, like people say that during COVID,
I mean, you get from the community what you put in the community.
Exactly.
And that's what so that's interesting. So of course, I mean, you can apply for a Google role in India, but for Indians to get Google roles abroad, it has to be inbound. You have to put all of this effort, right? Got it.
Yeah, that's how it is.
Makes some sense.
That's how.
But tell me one thing: how did the entire, of course, the sales journey helped you, crack this role at Google or get this inbound lead for the first time? But tell me one thing, which is how did that startup experience running CypherX, running inFeedo, running your Facebook page, how did all of those things help you, crack that interview at Google? Because as I hear, interviewing at Google is hard. Right? I did it in college, and in fact, I did not get it.
Right. No, I mean, of course, it's luck for sure as well that is involved. But the reality is very, very. These are some myths that I like to break, Pratham. So when you're interviewing at Google, you have 5-6 rounds, sometimes 7, sometimes 8, right? And what I hear, the kind of things that you find online is nowhere close to what the reality is. The reality is such that Google doesn't ask you mind twisters or tongue twister of sorts that people talk about, right? My learning and my experience for Google was expect the unexpected. Number one. Number two.
So what does that mean, number one?
What that basically means that be prepared for anything and everything, which means broadening your horizon. Let's say, I'll give you an example. So over here in my role as well, it's not a sales role, by the way. Google doesn't have a sales team. Why would they need a sales team, right? It's a strategy, technology plus strategy consulting role.
Yeah, it's consulting. It's helping your clients use Google better.
Yeah. In my interview, like I had a telephonic interview. I had a GCA round, general cognitive ability, then a leadership round, Googliness round, role-related questions. It's called RRK. All of these rounds are designed to judge you or evaluate you on different aspects of everything. Holistically is the word to use, right? So whether let's say when you're talking about a role-related question, right? Now, when I'm giving an answer to a role-related question, it's an elevator pitch that I'm giving in 60 seconds. One question is not more than 60 seconds. And for each question, they'll ask you 5 other follow-ups. So if I'm expecting, okay, you know what, I've learned this answer. This is what in my head, this is a framework. That's
so
thrown
they'll
off,
throw
right?
like a curveball at you.
Exactly. So my point is, if you holistically develop yourself, because I had done elevator pitching before, I'll give you another example, right? Now, when you talk about starting up and consulting and entrepreneurship, right? I would say frameworks and consulting challenges that we do in B School is somewhat related to the world of startups and can help you there. It's not a direct relation to what you do. In this case, I had frameworks that I had to learn, which I had not done in the last so many years, right? It was all practical knowledge that I had. And then that is essentially what happened. I wore that hat. I had to prep. Again, it's not something that you can just go and do. So they expect you to give an answer, with a framework in mind. I'll give, like, for example, there's a STAR method, situation, action, reaction, and all of that stuff, like assumptions that you state. And then there's CFS method that you use, which is clarifying, and then, asking, giving a framework again, and then a solution, quoting your assumptions. A lot of those frameworks, again, you don't have to learn anything, but you do have to put on that consulting hat as well to think that, hey, you know what are the kind of different layers that I can break this down to, and what could be the objective, the answer that can come out. I'll give you an example, Pratham. So imagine a question like, how do you monetize Google Maps? Right? Open-ended question. How do you answer that? There's no right and wrong answer to that.
It's about how you... It's a journey.
It's a journey, right? How do you answer that is what they're looking at, not whether your answer is going to be the right or the wrong answer. Number one. Number two, the question that I got was, Google's already a $1 trillion company, right? And how do you now, what are the top 3 things or 2 things that Google invests in now that continue to make it the number 1 in the world? Now, that's something that you'll be like, okay, you know what, only Sundar Pichai can think about that. But that's not the case, right? They want you to be entrepreneurial. They want you to think beyond. So one of the things that I've heard about Google, and something that I've learned as well, is that they love people who are very unique and got spikes. And again, that's what I've learned, at least, and that's the dot that I can connect. That people who've got spikes, people who have tried differently, the culture fitting aspect of Google of being entrepreneurial as well, operating as a startup, all of that is something that Google values a lot.
Got it.
Which is why I think all of those things added up to stand out. Because otherwise, Pratham, in all honesty, it's extremely rare for someone to go directly from India to a different country altogether.
Yeah, especially at Google.
Yeah, and because generally what people do is they have a local degree. All the Googlers that I know now who are part of my team, they're all got a degree, maybe a master's or an undergrad in Europe or the US.
Right.
And only then do they end up there. So unless you're not exceptional in what you do, they will anyway not, doesn't work out for them.
Got it. So let's end with maybe a couple more questions, right?
Yeah, sure.
First is, if I want a job in Google, Dublin, right? You're in Dublin. Give me a pathway. We understand yours, right? which goes through doing a startup and sort of experimenting, doing micro experiments, as you mentioned, and then sort of marrying that with whatever you learned in terms of frameworks in class, etc. And then rocking your interview.
Right.
What would you tell someone who's currently at Master Junior, let's say?
Right. There are a lot of pathways, by the way, that you can go through, of course. But I would say that if I had to do it, let's say another way out, if this didn't exist, what I would do is once I know what my destination and goal is. Let's say over here I've for shortlisted FANG companies, right? Let's say there are 3 shortlists that I've done, and these are the intersections of the role, or maybe I'm very clear in my head that this is a role I want to go for, or maybe these are the kind of these are the intersections of role as well, because you never know what what works best for you or what will work out for you eventually as well. So once you map that out, once your goal is very clear that okay, this is my target, Now, how do I reach that is when you backtrack from it. So, for example, Google has very specific set of skill set. The biggest problem is people don't read their job descriptions that are available. I was told that, I read it maybe 100 times just to understand whether I fit in the perfect way or not. Because that's what happens with these companies or, any of these aspirational, tech brands, that they want specifically people with certain matching traits, especially with the JD.
Which I mentioned in the JD.
Which I mentioned in the JD, the biggest problem is people don't read it, right? Like maybe they don't prep well for it. So using the right set of words, knowing that, let's say, a strategist or maybe a marketer means a lot more than what comes superficially, right? Is something that will help you a lot. Because once you open the puzzle, which is essentially that when I know these are the roles, these are the roles that are there, these are the JDs that I have, job descriptions that I have, let me break it down to the skill set that is required for me to be there, right? So number one side of thing, that's one pillar that I'm talking about, which is being able to understand what entails or what it takes to be there.
Got it.
Once you've got that, of course, there are resources that you can figure to make that happen, right? Like it's not necessarily your own classroom. It could be, talking to people outside. It could be doing courses. It could be, anything for that matter. In Masters Union, you've got so many different, courses that are there. Most importantly, there are, you've got access to people who can help you in anything niche that you want. Like, for example, even the smallest of finance doubts that I have, let's say marketing kind of doubts that I have, I can reach out to people to do that. And you can learn from the best.
Sure. So, as I hear it, is basically you look at the JD deeply.
Yes.
Figure out what skills it is that they're looking for.
Yes.
And then work towards those skills. Do courses, find people who are experts in those skills and sort of build that up for yourself. Got it.
That is one side of it.
So that is one side. Okay.
That's also one side of it. So there are two parts to it. Sorry to maybe not specify that before, but the first thing is that's part one. Part two is when you start actually going out of the outside world and actually displaying those, or maybe actually implementing those. Like for example, let's say you write, you're a great, you want to get into content, right? For that matter, or even marketing for that matter, because that's the most easiest example that I can give you here. Start writing on LinkedIn, right? Start posting or sharing content that can help or build an audience for that matter. If you want to get into that kind of role, right? Number one. Number two, let's say you want to get into a strategy kind of position, right? Go and look for startups and businesses and ventures who you can strategically help. I don't want any money. Don't keep, have that kind of an attitude. Don't, specify and say that, this is what I'm looking for. I'm a free resource. Look at my background. This is what I've done. This is what I can do, right? So when you have practical exposure to things, when you actually go and experiment, as I said, and do it on the ground, why don't you start up for that matter? Like, as I said, start up for that matter, gain those skill set, apply it in the real world. All of that application. So one was knowledge. The other one was application. And that's how, when you start doing it, is when you can start building a network where you become visible. So that's the whole thought process behind.
That's the loop
that you can run.
Final question. Let's say I don't have a spike. Let's say I've not done a startup before. Let's say I've not, I don't have a viral Facebook page. And now I land in an MBA school or at Masters Union. How do I build my spikes such that I can expect a call from Google? Can you lay out that entire journey for me? What should I be doing today till the time I get that offer?
The simple answer is startup.
Okay.
So of course, I would say that definitely. I mean, as we've been talking, definitely, startup. When you're looking at starting up, right? There's something called the opportunity cost, right? The opportunity cost is that comes to you when you start on campus is so low. There's nothing you've got to lose. Everything is in a pause. You've got things where you've got a cushion or a blanket for you to fall down on if you make some mistakes. And that's something that is so low over here. It's worth the try. It's not about, whether you really want to become an entrepreneur or not at the end of the day, but experiment by building a venture, building an initiative. As I said, you don't even have to call it a venture. It could be an initiative that you work on, number one. Number two, but put in the best of effort to become the best in put your best foot forward and take it to the max limit that you can take it to, right? Not just do like a a medium, okay-ish kind of job, right? Do become the best in what you do. If you're writing content, become the best at it. If you're, really building a venture, make sure you're able to, you're pitching to investors for that matter. Whether you get in or not, this is a secondary question, right? But those are some of the, aspects, whether you want to build in marketing, sales, HR, finance, anything for that matter. There's a gamut, like a solid set of skill set that you gain out of it. Something that you would not even know. And that's the best part, right? You don't plan for such things. Such things take you, add up at the end of the day and give you that that skill set, the network that you need to land a job at Google, for that matter. Any aspiration that you have, not just Google for that matter. Let me clarify, but definitely start up, Pratham, at a place like Masters Union, 200%.
So, I mean, if I'm hearing you correctly, essentially, starting up has very little risk when you're in college or when you're in an MBA program. So you might as well. You have nothing to lose. So that's one.
Yeah.
Second is that as you sort of are pitching your startup, as you are building a product, as you are going to customers, as you are talking to investors, not only are you learning those skills as you do those things, but you're also building that network. And one of those people might be, your next referral.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely true. There's always good, like you've got nothing to lose. That's the whole point. There's only good news at the end of the day. There's no
because
bad.
in college, what happens these days is that people want to sit for the on-campus placements, right? And people come and, companies come, somehow something happens, right?
Yeah.
But Google Dublin is not going to come to an Indian campus.
Right.
Correct.
Right.
And so to be able to sort of target those kind of roles, you have to build spikes in, I guess.
Right.
One of the ways is starting up.
I feel, Pratham, that you have to again, there's completely nothing wrong in thinking about placements at all, of course. But the way you should look at it is you should broaden your horizon. That's exactly what I feel. It's like a rubber band, right? Like when you stretch it, your limits actually cross, and the next time it's much more easier to do the same thing again. That's exactly what's going to happen here. Have a bigger, aspiration and what you can do. You will anyway
go beyond consulting, try sales, try.
It's all about experimentation, because whether you're ending up at a consulting firm, whether you're ending up at a technology firm, for that matter, any place, right? It's a combination of a lot of things. It's never just in isolation. That is exactly the myths that people need to understand, that it has to be holistic, and it'll help you with every other aspect as long as you can ensure that you're broadening and experimenting with things.
So on that note of experimentation, thank you so much for coming down.
It's been my pleasure.
And best of luck have you already started your role at Google?
I've already started. Now remotely. I'm moving out.
And so you found your housing, etc. all
yes,
set?
Yes.
Awesome.
That's taken care of by Google. So
okay. Oh wow. All right. Awesome. So best of luck. Keep coming back, and thanks for giving us this time.
Of course, brother. It's always a pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.